now I'd like to share a little bit about our presenter. Dr. Leonard A. Cruz is the first Filipino American to be named Presidential Scholar in the Arts and one of the few to have an interdisciplinary PhD in urban education with a focus on the performing and creative arts. He is the founder of the Creative Arts and Resilience Project and is currently working on an interactive playbook titled The Laban Project, Learning Through Arts and Building Awareness Now. This past year, 2020, Dr. Cruz was a movement research artist at Judson Church in New York City, invited guest speaker for RIDES at Harvard University's Graduate School of Education, virtually danced in continuous replay, coming together for Bill T. Jones / Arnie Zane and company, and was on a distinguished arts panel discussing lived experiences of dancing body toward radical survival, for Dance Like Your Life Depends on It on World AIDS Day. Cruz graciously obtained his 500 hours of yoga teacher training this past October, researching and focusing on protocol titled Resilience in Humanizing Yoga Online Teaching. We're so thrilled to be working with you again, Leonard. And with that, I hand it off to you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, everyone, for attending this interactive webinar. You know, yesterday, Maya and I, we were preparing for this talk today, and I said to her, it's okay to not be okay because what had happened on Wednesday with the Capitol. And I was going to do a different meditation, and I thought to myself, I'm just going to practice with you all and hopefully invite you all to do this Shamatha Vishpasana meditation. It's like 5 minutes. So I invite you to seat comfortably on your chair or on a cushion like I am on the floor. Your feet are planted, supported by the earth. Your hands are relaxed on your thighs and being supported by your thighs. Your sit bones are grounded and is supported by either your chair or your cushion. Your spine is lengthening and straight with energy coming out through the crown of the head. The fronts of the body are soft, gentle, and open. Your mouth is relaxed, your tongue, teeth are relaxed. In Shamatha Vishpasana, it's an awakened meditation. So your eyes are gently open with a gaze like 4 to 6 feet and down in the diagonal in front of you. Not really looking at anything, but knowing and seeing space, taking space on your chair, on your cushion. That's the posture. And what's important is this gentle gaze with the eyes open. Now we come to the breath. The breath is in through the nose and out through the nose. And really feel the rise and fall of the belly as you inhale and as it descends in your exhalations. And now we come to the mind. Let's imagine that in the foreground is your posture, your dignified sitting position with awareness and feeling of the breath in breathing coming inside through the nose and out through the nose. And the mind is in the background. Our mind might be thinking, which it does. Just know that you can come back to the breath that's always there, inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the nose. If the mind starts to wander, just come back gently to the breath that's always there, and feel the rise of the belly as you inhale and exhale. So that's basically the practice of shamatha, being present with the body, the breath, and the mind. Inhaling and exhaling, you can move your shoulders, your head and neck, and come back to this webinar. Yeah, I did this because I was thinking, oh my gosh, so much is happening in the world today with the pandemic of Corona, um, race relations, race inequities, gender inequities, LGBTQIA plus inequities. And I just said to myself, the reason why we do the contemplative practices, why, is to just be present without having to acknowledge or think, but just be and let go. So I just wanted to share that with you. Um, I'm honored to be able to share what I'm passionate about, which is storytelling through creative arts and the contemplative pedagogies. Um, because as a child, uh, you know, the arts were very important to me, just as much as the contemplative practices and how they've been enriched throughout my life with so many different experiences of the contemplative practices, as well as through the arts and storytelling. So I am asking of you, if you have paper and pencils or something to write with, please grab a hold of them. Um, um, Paper and pencils. Oy. So I'm curious as to know. Okay. So I want you to look at this beautiful image. And what's your first reaction and feeling to this image? And I want you to write 1 to 2 sentences. And you can inhale and exhale or smile or really look at this and take it in as you inhale and exhale, and let it guide you as you write your 1 to 2 sentences of what you feel with this photo or what's your first reaction. And you can either share it on the paper. If you don't have paper, you can share it on chat. That's fine as well too. So there's no right or wrong. Just really go through with the heart of what you see. Once you've written those 2 sentences, 1 or 2 sentences, grab what is there to be able to draw and sketch what you're feeling with this photo, with this image, right? Perhaps it's love, or it's sky, or whatever your 2 sentences, 1 to 2 sentences, take words that come out that allow you to draw images that best interpret this 1 or 2 sentences. So it can be a body, it can be a heart, it can be a hand, it can be the mountain, it can be the sky. Just, try not to think so much, just really be spontaneous. Take from the 2 sentences, and it can be abstract. There's no right or wrong now. So just allow yourself to freely draw what comes to mind when you see this image. And then with these 3 images, 3, 4, 1 image, how would you gesture this with your hands, with facial expression? Or even if you want to dance it, how would you dance these 2 images that you've drawn? So, you can practice, you know, placing hands on the heart, or placing hands to the eyes, and then perhaps creating an image with your hands. And once you've done that, what songs do you know that come perhaps with this image for you? And maybe put it in chat. Or maybe it's a verse from a song. What songs come from an image like this, or inspires you, you know? And so we've used all of the art forms to be able to express oneself with these 2 sentences of what you feel and your reaction to this image. It's a simple exercise, and but it's a beautiful one, because now then I'll tell my story of this beautiful mountain. This beautiful mountain is Mount Araya. It's in the province of where I was born, in Pampanga, Philippines. And there's lots of mythological figures in the Philippines, that there's this man, mythological man, that lives in this volcano. It's actually a volcano, but it's not working at the moment. You might know 6 miles away is another mount, and it's Mount Pinatubo. And this one is an active volcano at the moment in the Philippines. So I just wanted to just say, that this mountain, this volcano is called Mount Araya. and it's in Pampanga, the Philippines, where I was born. And I find that that's important because when because there's so many mountains throughout the world and universe, but this is about then me and my culture. And when someone shares something of who they are and their culture, just then opens up for more inclusion and empathy. And I'm a firm believer that we should do this in our curriculum and instruction, or when we're working with community members, or when we're just, if you're a nurse or health practitioner, hearing stories, sharing photos of your patients, I believe are so important. So, yeah. Maya, should we ask for volunteers if anyone wants to share, or no? Just go on.
Sure. If anyone feels so moved,
Raise your hand.
literally, yeah, you can use the raise hand function if you want to do a little sharing, or you can continue sharing in the chat, or if your video is open, you can share a movement without speaking. Many options.
Okay, so there's no raise hand, so I'll continue then. Okay. So as a child, I learned Filipino dances and Hawaiian hula. And so I'll share in Hawaiian, the arm gesture, the hand gesture for love is here. And so if you want to do this with me, you can. This is love. So your wrists are crossed and they're in front of your heart. This is love, or aloha, aloha. In Filipino, it's mahal ko. So this hand gesture is love. Mountain is, or volcano is, arms at the edge of your camera going to a diagonal at the diagonal up. And that's mountain. That's mauna in Hawaiian. And in Tagalog, Filipino, it's bundok, mountain. Tree in is your hand resting on your fingers and you're swaying the palm of the hand. This is tree. In Hawaiian, it's kumala'au. In Tagalog, Filipino, it's mangapuno. So we can say, coming back to love, I love mountains. I love trees. So I shared very much of something that's dear to me are my dances that I learned as a child. So then there's this for educators or for research scholars, there's a theory called funds of knowledge. And funds of knowledge is very important in education today because it allows then children from different backgrounds to be able to express what is happening at home, who they are, what language they speak, who lives with them, what sorts of foods do they eat, and to be able to share that is very important in our curriculum and instruction today. So I just wanted to share that with you. So Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence theory was very important in my doctoral research and in my PhD. Dr. Gardner believes that we all have different strengths and weaknesses within these multiple intelligences. And we just go through, I'll just go through them, visual, spatial. And so you see the artist and maybe architects. Um, Dancers are great with space as well, visually. Um, I know I'm terrible with linguistic verbal. Um, I just don't learn languages very quickly. Even though my parents spoke Filipino, I was raised in a predominantly Mexican American neighborhood, 98% in San Antonio, Texas. And here in Germany, I live in Germany at the moment. Mein Deutsch is so schlecht. It's just, with this it just doesn't, I have no feeling for language. And that's why I chose dance. And that's why I chose dance as my profession. Next is interpersonal. I'm great working with others, collaborating with others, right? And intrapersonal is the opposite, working alone. Um, um, yeah, there's many people who love to work alone. And then there's the logical mathematical part side, which is not me. My father was a math teacher and he always scolded us because we were terrible at math. I'm an artist. I had nothing. I mean, I nothing to do with math. And then there's the musical aspect, um, bodily kinesthetic aspect, which is my highest strength, and then naturalistic intelligence. And um, I love this naturalistic, right? It's about nature. And I'm always talking about um, going back, decolonizing, and going back to our ancestors and nature. And before the Philippines was colonized, we were animist, Buddhist, Hinduist, Muslim. And animist is very much about nature, right? And so I look at my father, who was a great gardener. And how do we scale back and get within ourselves these different intelligences in our lives? And to know that you can then work with your students, their strengths, and help them or allow them to be able to do a rhythmic dance because they're struggling with math, to do something rhythmically, or to look at a piece of architecture and say, can you dance these lines? Why not? Instead of memorize the shapes and what they are. How do we allow then our children, our students, to use their strengths, their passions, talents, to be able to express themselves in other forms, intelligence like logical and mathematical. So storytelling is important, right? Because it has existed since the dawn of time, right? Human beings, and maybe it wasn't spoken, right? Because the language wasn't there. So then we see then in caves drawings, right? I'm sure gestures, facial expressions played a great role. Perhaps song might have come as a way to express rhythm. So to know that storytelling can be expressed in so many different ways. And again, I go back to Howard Gardner, Dr. Howard Gardner, who's a professor at Harvard, and he believes that this is your powerful weapon, storytelling, right? Because it's coming from our authentic experiences. I wanted to share, um, I always travel back to the United States for Christmas and New Year's, and I couldn't because of COVID this time. But I remember in the New Year, an uncle of ours was at the table. He's like maybe in late 80s, and he fainted. And my sister-in-law, my brother, called an ambulance, and my nieces and nephews and my youngest brothers, and a lot of them didn't really know who he was. He was just there, and they were just wondering, he's fainted. Well, I hope he's okay. But really, they didn't know who he really was. And the following day, we met at my mom's house, where all my four brothers and two sisters were raised in San Antonio, Texas. And my nieces and nephews were there. And I told them this story about this particular uncle, that he's a famous architect in San Antonio, that he built two hotels that are well known in San Antonio. But most importantly, he built half the section of our house, the master bedroom, the second bathroom, and the dining room. And my nieces and nephews were in awe in not knowing that this uncle was so important in our life, in our upbringing. And so this is where storytelling becomes very important in sh- um, in the legacy of our ancestors, and making sure that that legacy of our ancestors are continued. Is that making sense? Okay. And why creative arts matters. Um, it's about time that we say STEAM, right? And this is where, as a scholar, a doctor, PhD, and as a professional dancer, choreographer, the two are analogous. Believe me, the research is the same. We have questions, we have inspiration, we have the same thing. We just do it physically, creatively, artistically. And it's the same thing with just finding literature, interviews, participants, and then the end product is the same. Right? And we need to stop saying that the arts, that they're both so important and at the same level, right? And I know during this economic troubled times, academia's in a recession. And I know through this COVID time, the humanities and the arts are being cut, right? And so I sit here as a person, as an activist, to say that the arts are so important to STEM, and to please continue to fight for the arts and to have them at the same level, because they're the same thing. Research, it's just, and it's creative, and they're just analogous to one another. And so I just wanted to mention Dr. Elliot Eisner and Dr. Maxine Green, very important, they're no longer alive, but very important educators, especially supporters of the arts within their research. And yeah. Oh, and I wanted to then share my story. So, if you're going to have this PowerPoint, so, and if you take it, I hope you acknowledge me, but then as well, then share your stories. Share your stories with your students, with your community members, right? So the creative arts matters to me because I come from a very humble beginning. I learned Filipino dances, Hawaiian dances in backyard patios, in church cafeterias. I never saw a dance studio until I was a senior, my last year in high school. And so I had to be very creative with what was in my house. I used, the walls to stretch, the couch to do, some jumps and flips so I wouldn't hurt myself. I was just being very creative with what was there within my house. And even though my neighborhood wasn't the safest, and stray dogs were always around, I tried to jog. My brothers would we my fathers would drop us off on the military base to play tennis, and my brothers would laugh because I would be doing stretches along the fence with my leg and these on the military base. So being creative with the arts matters. Um, Not only for someone coming from uh, a humble beginning, a socioeconomic background that is very different than what we think about dance and dance studios. Um, but as well as just in life, I sing popular songs, pop music, with not singing the lyrics properly, and my nieces and nephews are like, "Are you okay?" It's like because I just sing whatever is there gibberish because the melody is great, but I don't know the lyrics. So that's being creative, right, with the arts. And as long as you're happy singing the song, no matter the lyrics are wrong, and it brings you joy, I see no problem with that at all. So this is where the creative arts comes into play. You don't have to be a professional artist in order to incorporate the arts within your curriculum instruction. Is that making sense? Yeah? Okay. Great. So what is contemplative pedagogy? I just wanted to acknowledge and thank the Association for Contemplative Mind in Higher Education because I was able to meet Dr. Daniel Barbazet and Mirabai Bush. They gave me a scholarship to go to the Omega Institute in New York, and it was there that really I came into contact with a community that is very much wanting to incorporate contemplative practices in their curriculum and instruction, and especially in higher education. So, so I mentioned them, and they've written a book together that I feel is also very important, Contemplative Practices in Higher Education. And I wanted to acknowledge them because they're very important, um, not only for the association, but um, um, why the contemplative practices are so important in higher education. So then I share my story of being raised in one of the poorest school districts in the nation, in Texas especially, the Edgewood School District. My parents were first immigrants from the Philippines. My father was in the military, and they wanted all 7 children to attend Catholic schools. So we attended Catholic schools within the school district. And what I learned from kindergarten all the way to high school was still today that prayer, and prayer that doesn't mean the Christian way as well, that prayer is important in my life today. And with prayer allows empathy. And I just remember as throughout my time um, with prayer, empathy, there was this opening for empathy to happen. And then the third was service. And and that's very important from my parents and when I am with my brothers and sisters, service, especially for communities of need. And so that those three are very important that I've learned from um, the Catholic religion. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to share that story with you. Mm. So here's the tree of contemplative practices. It's a wonderful tree, right? Because just as much as the slide for multiple intelligences, right? We have a tree with all these possibilities for contemplative practices, right? And so you can take and be able to say, okay, well, let's take let's do a pilgrimage to the African American Museum or to the Jewish Museum, or let's go to a landmark, right? And pay homage. So to know that there's this tree of contemplative practices and the possibilities of how one can take and put this, incorporate this in your curriculum and instruction. So let's shake out a little, hands out in front, arms above, shake out that energy, shake out the arm side, shaking the arms down, and shake out the arms behind you, shake out the arms everywhere. And breathe heavily. Shake out, shake out, shake out, shake out, shake out, and release and relax and calm. Take deep breaths in and out. So I always feel like shaking is also important. It's in all diasporas, right? In African dance, in flamenco, in Southeast Asian, in Tai Chi, in yoga. Um, Shaking happens, right? And so I believe that it's important to allow students to shake themselves, your community members. So I've taught a meditation class for here in Germany for performing arts university students, and I give them three possibilities. They can sit and meditate. When they enter the class, they either sit and meditate, lie on their mat and meditate, or they shake to release, or they go to the bathroom and scream and yell and come back to the room. So I think it's important to give them many different possibilities, right? Because maybe this person does not want to sit or lie down. The person wants to just shake out some sort of energy of this anger or physicality of this um, active energy needs to come out, or they just need to scream and go to the bathroom and scream and come back. And that's okay too. So how do we allow then this contemplative practices of trees and possibilities for your students, for your patients, for your community members to say, I'm not doing a sitting meditation today. I'm just going to shake out my body for the next minute, or so, and to allow that to happen. Are we already at the conclusion? Oh my gosh. Okay. Um, So I'll read this. I know it's strange, but what surprises me all these years within the past 25 years is the ease with my participants and why they're able to explore creative arts and the contemplative practices and sharing their authentic stories and discussing different states of being. And that's important. I just discussed that with you, right? That um, that the shaking allows them to be able to be calm, or the lying allows them. And these different ways of being, right, are important. And how they are able to know their worlds and that which they defend. That's called epistemology of self and the other, and how their backgrounds, values, beliefs motivate, inform, and frame the purpose of their stories. Subjectivities, theoretical framing. So I just introduced to you Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, or funds of knowledge. This is Lewis Moll, Moll. So how they're able to take these different theories and say, this is why. And more importantly, participants are able to acknowledge empathy, diversity, and inclusion with each other's stories and artistic work, interrelatedness and empowerment throughout the workshop, class time, and semester. So I've worked with storytelling, the creative arts, and contemplative practices with kindergartners, elementary school children, high school students, and college, university age students, as well as communities, LGBTQIA communities. Um, and so it's just, and workshops semester long. So I created a device, work with college students um, with just using 3 questions. And the next slide will, I think we'll talk about those slides when it comes up. So I just wanted to share that with you. This is a quote from Paulo Freire. He's a very important, he's no longer alive, but um, he is the founder of Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And there's Augusto Boal, who's also has created Theater of the Oppressed. And so this quote is, "The teacher is, of course, an artist, but being an artist does not mean that he or she can make the profile, can shape the students. What the educator does in teaching is to make it possible for the students to become themselves." And I think this is so important. So let's do just an easy, quick meditation. Um, it's a smiling one, so I want you to smile. Inhale, smile. And exhale, let that smile immerse throughout the body. We'll do this 2 more times. Inhale, smile. And exhale, release that smile throughout the body. Last time, smile, inhale. And exhale, release that smile. Good. So that's just a short relaxation technique, and I find this great um, when you start to panic or be triggered. I usually smile, or when I think negatively of something that I see, I usually smile and then let that smile, whatever feeling comes out, let it immerse through the body. It's interesting because sometimes it's joy, elation, but sometimes it's sadness. It's interesting, but that's okay, right? Because it's a release of energy that's coming through. So so yes, I just wanted to share that short um, practice. So here are 3 questions that I think are great to use in one's daily life, or is the answer for prayer in schools, right? Um, um, and then again, I'm not saying prayer in the Christianity way, right? How do we say that introspection, contemplation, reflection, right, um, is the same, right? And I know that public schools are saying, no, no prayer, and that shouldn't happen. But then how do we allow introspection and contemplation within our classroom, within our daily life, with sharing this with your community members, um, or your patients if you're a nurse practitioner? Or I practice this every day. I wake up and I say, okay, what are you grateful for today? And I've shared this with students. And then what I did in the beginning of this webinar is say, okay, write 1 to 2 sentences, what you are grateful for today. And then after that, again, draw 3 or 4 images that best expresses what you're grateful for today. And then how would you gesture or dance or move these 3 images of what you're grateful for today? And then what songs come up? Or you take your 2 to 3 sentences and create a rap, you know, with the 2 to 3 sentences of okay, I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for my life. Just be creative with rhythm, with clapping, with body rhythm. So that there's this possibility that all of the art forms are there, right? So how would you start this out? Maybe in the beginning of the week, or do this um, with your students every other day, or just once a week, and see what happens, and I think like open-ended questions of what you're grateful for today allows then some sort of positivity, right? Before you then go to the second question, which is, what are you concerned about today? And so in particular, during this pandemic, and so we know that COVID-19 exists, and then we know that race, gender, sexual orientation, relations, and inequities exist, right? And so how would you frame it? Perhaps one day it is focusing just on COVID, one week. The following week, it's race, relations, and inequities, or it's 1 month that you focus on this, or the semester is just focusing on um, race, relations, and inequities. And then the third is, what positive action will I do today? So with these 3 questions, I've worked a semester long with students um, at my last college in the United States. And we created work with just these 3, and again, answering these questions with the 4 different art forms. So a rap came out. Um, it was also the time when there was lots of peaceful marches. So Black Lives Matter was important at this time. So we already took what was, posters were already drawn because there were images already coming out through what was written of what they were concerned today, right? And so it was a performance, but it also was dealing with what was happening at this present time and moment with their lives. And I believe this is so important. Then we go back to the title of this webinar. It's about embodiment, inclusion. Um, what is, oh, I'm sorry, I lost it. What is it, Maya? I have to look up again. What
Empowerment, I believe.
Empowerment.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last one is empowerment, right? And that's one of the most important ones, right? Because then students are empowered because they've been researching, answering, you know, uh, putting out their concerns and telling their authentic stories amongst their student their colleagues, right? And then coming together, and we as mediators, we as implementers, provide them the resources, the contemplative pedagogies, the the arts, the creative arts, right? We provide them that possibility as the mediator and implementer, right? We go to the site of where slavery happened, right? So that we learn about each other's backgrounds and cultures and where they're coming from. So these three questions just came from all of the religions, from indigenous, and these three questions sometimes might happen, right? And if we look at the indigenous, I've been to 2 sweat lodges in Wisconsin with a Native American Indian tribe. And this is very much what we do in a circle within the sweat lodge, is this inquiry of what we're, with gratitude of being with one another, what's concerning us and what do we want to happen? What is our dream goals as we leave? And this happens in Lectio Divina, right? Christianity. I talked about my Catholic upbringing, right? About prayer, empathy, and service. Lectio Divina is read, reflect, respond, and rest. Buddhism is the 6 paramitas: generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and I can't see the word because of, but if you can see it, you see it, right? And then yoga has this 8-fold path of the yamas and niyamas: right speech, right understanding, right action. And then I put in Bree Pakawa's 6 elements of social justice curriculum, right? So self-love and knowledge, that's storytelling, funds of knowledge, right? And self-love is the contemplative practices. And with that, once that happens, once you create that atmosphere, allows for respect for others, issues of social justice, social movements and social change, awareness rising, and social action. Very related to just these 3 questions as well. Okay, so let's do another practice. It's tightening your face, closing your mouth, eyes, wrists, hands, fists, shoulders. Inhale. And with a sound, throw it out. Ha! Ha! Okay, again, bound, close, eyes, mouth, hands. And throw it out. Ha! And voice. Ha! Last time. Inhale, bound, close, eyes, mouth. And ha! Throw it out. Throw it out. So we have time, you know, I think like, let's answer this. What positive action will you do today? Can you share it on chat? Since we're an hour almost done with this webinar, or you can write it. If you don't want to share it with others, you can write it down on the piece of paper. What positive action will you do today? Okay. Um, I didn't, where's chat? Oh, I can't see chat, right? Because I have the full screen, Maya.
I'm not sure how the chat works when you're sharing your screen, but there's
Okay,
a lot of responses coming in.
good, great, great.
Yeah.
Okay, um, what's next? Yeah, it's 30 minutes. You want 30 minutes of questions and discussion?
It's we're open for it.
Um, yeah, I mean, I was just saying to Maya that this is very difficult to do as a webinar because I'm very much of a kinesthetic person, and usually you can do this at a conference in a workshop setting where people are together in a circle. But then, this is the thing why this is also just as important, right? We're hearing many families with children that are sitting in front of their computer, right? They're sitting in front of their computer for many hours. So then how do you, as a teacher, as a professor, as a parent, say, take a break, shake and release, or um, be playful with them and say, okay, what are you grateful for today? Um, and how would you, draw or paint this, right? And maybe use it, you know, as your background for your backdrop when you draw what you're grateful for today. And then the teacher might say, well, what's in the background today? Well, my mom asked me what I'm grateful for today, and this is my pet dog, this is my aunt, this is, my house and home. So this is, again, how are we going to be creative with the arts, with oneself, with family members, with others, right? And especially when we're now virtually online learning, right? To take breaks of shaking to release, to take breaks to just do this progressive relaxation. It's a full one, but usually progressive relaxation technique is body parts, right? From the head down to the toes. But here I just use the hands, the shoulders, the face, and the eyes and mouth to close and release, right? So how do you use these different contemplative practices for breaks for yourself, for your children, for students?
Leonard, if you're ready, you can feel free to stop sharing your PowerPoint and then you'll be able to see more of our participants and hopefully you'll be able to see the chat because there's a lot of good stuff coming in.
Okay, so I just stop sharing, right? Where is this?
Yeah, it should be on the bottom of your toolbar area of the Zoom screen. It might
Oh,
be
here
just,
it's at the top.
oh, okay.
Okay, there.
There.
So I thank everyone for being patient with me. You know, again, I get nervous because it is just my face and my body. But if you really did see me live, I'd be going crazy with you all. I'm really being present with you all, and so forgive me in that sense and way. So, oh, let me see chat. Um, I'm open for questions or insights or just share, what was experienced.
So again, using the raise hand function or chat or doing this until I see you. Um, and we'll start calling on people. I do see someone here. Go ahead, Anastasia.
Yeah, I have to unmute. I just really want to express my gratitude. I was chatting through the entire process. I I want to reflect back the challenge of for folks that are kinesthetic and living in, you know, the dance body movement, blood, blood, bone, breath, physical. This has been the hardest year of my life as a teacher. And I do teach dance, and I'm teaching yoga and trying to continue to do all those things online. And I just am so grateful for, first of all, knowing there's somebody else out there doing it, because the school that I am at is very small. And so I'm sort of their little odd duck. And I say that with love. But I also am really curious about, in the conversation around particularly race and gender and inequities, and the ways that we hold, scholars argue that we hold trauma in our bodies if we don't shake it or quake it or let it go. And I work primarily at a Catholic institution, so we'll just let that sit for a moment. And I'm wondering about, in our current very eruptive state, which is what it feels like to me, not new and not, at least not for me, all that shocking, ways that we might open space for students who traditionally, and I'm actually thinking in particular folks who have been oppressed, but also in ways that they may not even recognize. And in this case, I'm thinking, and I don't want to center whiteness, so I want to be really honorable around that. I'm not trying to center that, but I'm thinking about the WASPs and the people who movement is so, like, that's one of the ways that we, my experience of white folks that I come into contact with often, it's one of the ways that we really control and dominate in academic spaces. And so I'm not exactly, I thought I had a clear question, but I think I guess what I'm getting at is this sort of, we're at a precipice of what is academic, and maybe it goes back to the conversation around art and science and how they're so valuable in that space, as I think of as people harden and distance and disembody to try and process, and have done for centuries. And then to have it happening behind a screen, where our capacity to engage folks energetically is, I feel like, is a little bit more limited. It's not totally gone, but it's much harder. And I'll give a concrete example, because I don't want to, I'm trying not to take up too much space. But for example, if I am in a Zoom meeting and I am working with students and there is silence, it's, if I haven't set the framework that silence is okay, they freak out. And they'll, by freak out, I mean that they just, I can see the disconnect between the physical and the embodied piece. And so I think I've been thinking a lot about that, how to incorporate the intimacy, particularly in performance-based classes and storytelling-based classes, in gender, race, where we're doing the work of bringing the body back into the story, how we can do that online in effective ways. And so I guess I'm really grateful for the exercises and examples you gave today. And I'm also sitting with the folks who, are in the prime of their educational experience, and they turn that camera off and shut down. And it's such a crucial time to not shut down and tune out. So thank you. I'm not sure what I was trying to ask exactly. Maybe you'll get it through the vibes of internet.
I'm hearing you, Anastasia. I'm hearing you. I think that it's important then, you know, how do we then find resources or find people of color, of the LGBTQIA community, of indigenous background, right? Whether, you know, and share their stories so that the students that are indigenous, Black, of color, LGBTQI, can identify more so and then be able to open up and share their stories. And I think that silence is golden, right? In many ways, right? And I feel like, how do we, as educators and contemplative practitioners, allow silence to not be of a negative aspect of fear, but more of just not judging it or inner critically saying something to yourself that this is happening, but just let it be, and then maybe ask, you know, ask in the chat. I'm wondering what you all were thinking at this time, because there was silence, right? I think that that's just something I hear you. When there's silence and students aren't responding and aren't sharing, I don't hear her.
Okay, sorry. I definitely agree, and I hear that. So I want to reflect back that I'm echoing that, and I think the piece around, I guess I'm trying to think of ways to support that silence. Yeah, you know what? I just miss body to body, breath to breath, bone to bone relations.
Mhm.
That's what it
I
comes
hear
down
you.
to. I'm
I
just
hear
really
you.
missing that.
I hear
And
you. And
having this conversation stirred it up.
I hear you. And, you know, I think that this is the time where I hear you. I think this is the time where we have to even go deeper within our practice as an artist, as a contemplative practitioner, as an educator, right? So that when hopefully there's this time, this COVID pandemic, we're able to then fully and um, with authenticity come together and share um, physical touch, our stories and experiences, because 2020 has been a very difficult year for me as well. I've lost family members, my sister, an uncle-in-law through COVID. Many friends have passed away with COVID, and yeah. So how do we hold space as well in that sense and way of with compassion and empathy? Okay, and that's all I wanted to say. Hello.
Thank you for your talk. It's very interesting. I'm very interested. I'm no longer working in higher education, and I just want to say I'm in awe of everyone who still is working in education under the current circumstances, because it must be such a challenge, and the absence of embodiment, yeah, is really, really painful. I really wanted to ask a very simple question. I mean, I'm very interested and have been for many years in Waldorf education.
Mm.
And to me, Waldorf education is the example par excellence of the integration of art, movement, all the art forms in a really, really embedded, constructive, deeply thought out way into primary and secondary schools. But of course, we don't really use these approaches very much in higher education. But I would just be interested to hear your view on that form of education in terms of integration with art, with creativity, and on what you think we might learn from that form of education, if you know anything about it, that is.
Oh, I do, because I live in Germany, and Waldorf is very important in Germany, right? There's many schools in Germany with throughout Germany that are Waldorf schools, right? So so no, I agree with you. Everything that's about it, right? Of circles, right? Sitting in circles, no corners, but in circular paths. And when we think of like circular gatherings, right, we go then back to as well to indigenous cultures, right? Sitting in circles, the spiral, the labyrinth, right? These are things that are very much about connectivity within space, within oneself, with one another, right? And I feel like this circular gathering and sitting with one another allows the contemplative as well as meaningful sharing with one another, because there's not, there's not this hierarchy of students in front and back and middle, but really all together. And I think that's a great, the Waldorf school perspective and teaching, way of teaching, I think is a great pedagogical way with incorporation of the arts and as well as with the contemplative practices. And um, yeah, being able to, as well as understand um, our indigenous past as well, and how the circle is very important to our being and existence when we come together. I just wanted to say, I didn't want to go there because I think this is another webinar, right? Is because I'm Filipino American, and I'm very in tune with my upbringing as a Filipino, which if you know anything about the Philippines, right? We've been colonized by many countries, and understanding my ancestry and knowing that I have Spanish ancestry, and then knowing that I have indigenous ancestry as well. And how do I exist with knowing within my DNA and ancestry that there were oppressors and being oppressed. And it just is very, I get emotional because it's a lot of suffering and a lot of ego power as well that I know exists within my family, as well as within communities within the Filipino culture, right? That can be quite extreme. And so the contemplative practices allows me to understand when I am abusive with power and how to let that ego go, let it go, and to know that also suffering and pain exists, trauma exists. And how do I use this DNA to empower myself to know that my ancestors before me were empowered for me to be able to be here today? And I say that as a Filipino American because I think that the United States, especially the white Americans, have to come to a reality of who they are and what has happened in the United States. And and I get emotional because I think then you know, I shared to you with what has happened in the Philippines. And so we know that colonization has happened, slavery has happened in the United States. And I think it's very important then, where are you within this picture? And especially white Americans. And how are we able to let go of ego and power? Because that has existed within one's ancestry. And how do you work with that?
Good afternoon to everyone. I just want to thank Leonard for this wonderful session and for this time to practice together, to use our bodies, to breathe, to sit with these very significant questions. I'm going to be leaving soon, but it's been hard to pull away. And Leonard, thank you so much for being with us, for joining us from Germany. My heart to you. I miss you. It's so wonderful to see you.
Michelle, oh my gosh.
We're gonna get together at some point.
Yeah, I have goose pimples right now just seeing you. Your energy is like boom, coming through the camera to me. So
This
thank
is
you.
yours. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone. Thank you.
Hello, Leonard. Thank you so much. Your comments just now on ego and power troubled me in a good way. And I'm just chewing on it. It's a constant issue and not always something I know how to deal with in my work with prisoners. I walk into that space with so many privileges, the privilege of not being incarcerated, the privilege of being white, male, cisgendered, on and on. And so I unconsciously, automatically, I'm almost automatically colonized by the space itself, which aligns with my default identities and runs contrary to the creative and liberating work that I'm trying to do with the men. And so I just offer that paradox and that problem.
I'm hearing you, Jonathan. But I think just you sharing this with what you just said, I think needs to be expressed with them. And I think once you share that openness of who you are, the privilege that you acknowledge, I think allows them for them to say, okay, well, he's an ally because he knows his privilege. He knows that this is systemic and I'm here and I'm acknowledging that. I think it's when you don't acknowledge it becomes a little bit more, right? So I think when you share authentic stories that are true to who you are, that we know is 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 what is happening in with systemic racism, with white privilege. When you put it out there, I'm a firm believer, I think others are able, hopefully, to be open and be able to then share whatever their stories of what has happened within their life. I know it might be easier because there's research out there that usually Indigenous, Black, students of color, LGBTQIA plus students are easily more susceptible to share with others that are from their community, right? That are of color. So, but I think you just acknowledging this to me allows me to say, okay, he understands. his privilege.
I try. Yeah.
And then as well as then, you know, and then your service, your positive action, right? Right action, right? Allows I think more positivity and kindness to come from you know, from the prisoners themselves. Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome, Jonathan. Thank you. So maybe I end with a meditation, right? Maya. So just seated comfortably in on your chair cushion, and this time you can have your eyes closed. I want you to go back to that very first photo of this webinar, this mountain. Immerse yourself. You're standing before this beautiful mountain with blue skies, with green trees, with rice fields. Feel the texture of the grass, or perhaps the mud, the earth. Breathe the fresh air of the trees. Feel the breeze of the air. Your eyes see the mountain and its wonder. The different colors of the mountain, the different colors of the trees and grass. You smell the vegetation, the fresh air. You see the spacious sky, the clouds floating by. You hear the wind. Perhaps you hear animals, birds, crickets, insects. Inhaling and exhaling, slowly, gently open your eyes and come back to the camera. I thank you. I hope you gained a lot from this webinar so that you can take it and bring it within your communities.
Thank you so much, Leonard, for sharing all of your stories with us and all of you with us. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Quick little reminder, we will be sending a recording and Leonard's slides post today, next week. So thank you all again. Thank you so much, Leonard. It was great being with you, even if through Zoom. And be well. And we'll see you soon, we hope.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.